Okay, we'll move on to our next section, which is Stephen. He is an art and design studio technician and educator in the Master of Teaching at the University of Melbourne. He works across a lot of digital pedagogies, First Nations perspectives, queer diversity, inclusion in the classroom. Part of Stephen's role is to provide students with hands-on technical support and problem solving to help ensure what is being made, tested, prototyped, provoked, prodded, and uncovered in the studio is reflected, refined, and clearly communicated in their ePortfolios. That sounds a bit like my job, Stephen, sometimes. So we are privileged to have him leading this workshop today, and that will give us some insights into how that is achieved. Over to you.
Thank you. I will share my screen and get this started. So thank you for that introduction, Jackie. So as Jackie mentioned, my name is Stephen. This is my first sort of mini bash of this kind. So I'm really excited to be here and to run a bit of a practical workshop with you, which we will get to at the end of this session, near the end of the session, about halfway through. It's been great hearing all the different perspectives and the approaches when you've had today. So I hope that I can add another interesting approach or elaborate on some of the things that we've already been discussing today. Especially when it comes to the topic that I've got up here, which is supporting students to create meaningful and personal ePortfolios. You might also read that as authentic learning. I would also like to take this time just to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which I am on today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Respect their elders past and present. And I'd also like to recognise that they were the first artists, designers and storytellers of the land on which I am currently on. I'd also just like to give a little bit more background about me. So I started a Master of Teaching at the University of Melbourne in 2022, finished in 2023, and then never really left, transitioned into the role of this visual arts and design technician within the Faculty of Education. Within this role, I'm part of this hybrid learning team, which means that I do support, as Jackie had mentioned, the students and the staff as we move between the studio or the classroom and digital platforms like PebblePad. Our team's work also, which is what Jodie had mentioned earlier, they did nominate us for a LearnX Award, and I just say that to highlight the incredible team that I do work with, led by Kate Coleman, who we heard on the panel earlier, Yvette Walker and Anna Ward-Davies. We're super thrilled by that, and a huge shout out to Carol Hunter, who is really fundamental in supporting us with that nomination and the reason why I'm here today as well. So thank you to everyone. We will get into what we're looking for today. So first off, I'm going to start with a bit of a background about my own ePortfolio journey and how I've come to think of portfolios as living documents. So they're things that move and evolve alongside our educational and professional journeys. We'll then look at the relationship between the studio or the classroom or a lecture space and PebblePad and how that plays out in practice, this sort of in-between space where these ideas, artifacts, reflections, and learnings begin to take shape. From there, I'll share some ways to scaffold ePortfolio creation for students who may not see themselves as quote-unquote designers. And we'll talk about how storytelling and visual flow as fundamentals of design can help them communicate their professional identities. We'll then finish up with a few user experience or UX design tips to make these portfolios more authentic, engaging, and easy to navigate. And then in the second half of this workshop, we will do a practical exercise to put that all into practice. So I hope everyone's gearing up for that. It will be a fun one. I'd also just like to say that throughout this presentation, I do have on the slide some screenshots of my own PebblePad portfolios that I've done throughout the years, and they do come with a few annotations and design notes. Some of them I will speak to directly and point out what's going on. Others I might just skim over. So do make sure that you're having a little look around as I'm rolling through these. And I'd also just like to note that I speak from my experience both as a student and from my current role supporting students. So do forgive me if I jump between those perspectives, but I do think that they really inform one another in this context. So ePortfolios as living documents. So my journey with PebblePad did start when I started my MTeach in 2022, as I mentioned. In that course, I used it in a couple of different subjects. There was one that really relied heavily on using a structured template, and other subjects, particularly the visual art design learning area, where we were given a blank canvas and just told to create. The templated portfolio, for me personally, did just become a bit of a dumping ground for things like checklists and observation notes. And it was all very task oriented, which did have its place at some point, but it's not something that I've ever returned to. And I wouldn't be able to tell you what I've done with that portfolio to this day. It'll be somewhere on PebblePad, I'm sure. But this blank canvas approach, and while it was daunting at first, learning a new technology while you're starting a new degree and meeting new people and all the other things that came with that, did become a real space for creativity, for risk, and for a bit of experimentation. So that freedom made me feel like these portfolios were mine and something that I'm really proud of and what I've created. And I really began to see how powerful this platform can be in supporting authentic identity work rather than just uniform assessment. So one of my first portfolios was one that we did as one of the first assignments when I started this course. We really jumped right into using PebblePad. And it was an educational set of playing cards that I created to encourage empathy and understanding towards queer students. It's what you see on the page here as well. So this single project has traveled with me for the last number of years. It was linked into later assignments as supporting evidence. It was the foundation for my year-long capstone research, and it now formed the basis or the crux of my Doctor of Education proposal, which I'm very proud to say I will be starting next year. So this portfolio is still alive and ready to be developed further as well. And I do believe that it did stay with me because it was really authentic to me, showcased a bit of my identity, both personally and professionally, and outlined my goals and really communicated what I stood for to my peers, to lecturers, and to potential employers as well. I have taken a few of these of my portfolios into job interviews, which has been great. And that's really what I mean by a living document. It is a space that continues to grow, continues to evolve, and that you can revisit, remix, reuse. And PebblePad really does make that possible because it lets you draw from that earlier work, carry forward with you what matters, and reframe it as you evolve professionally and as you continue to learn and uncover more. And I'm not sure that I could say that I would have really developed that attachment or that kind of professional identity or that clarity around who I was professionally if that task had been templated. So being invited to create an experience for others who were viewing my portfolio did really change the way I thought about my own practice. I wanted the portfolio to read as a narrative, to have a bit of a flow, to make people feel something, to communicate something personal, as well as blending in the theory that I was learning throughout the course, really telling a story, and that combination made it all the more meaningful. So what is this in between the classroom and assessment, and what is it in this space? So I really like to think of the in-between as this messy, playful space where it's between classroom activity and a sort of final, I shouldn't say final, but between an assessment, where learning is gathered before it can be reflected on, perhaps polish up a little bit, but really the word I love to use here is before it's curated. Every discipline has artifacts in this space, whether that be lab notes or lesson plans, random sketches, doodles, voice recordings, photos, or even things from social media or the general media that the students are encountering in their everyday lives that are informing what they're learning in theory in the universities as well. So students can really collect and layer these artifacts together, and they build small fragments over time that can later feed into an ePortfolio. So it's not about producing these perfect pieces to start with in this in-between space. It really is just about documenting the process, this idea of all these entangled things coming together while ideas are still formulating and while you're still learning. And you're encouraging students to use either physical spaces or digital notebooks, say a Padlet, even Word, PowerPoint, digital whiteboards, to kind of capture all this thinking before they move it on to PebblePad. Or even, I think it was Paul this morning who mentioned using the asset store in PebblePad as a place to kind of store different artifacts that have been collected. And then this can be taken and reworked into future iterations. I think it's really important that in this space, we are encouraging this idea of play and peer-to-peer support. So whether it is in these physical or these digital environments, if they do offer a space for collaboration, for students to comment on each other's artifacts that can spark debate or conversation as they continue to learn. So these in-between spaces do really look different for all of our students. So in art design, it might be messy studio notes or quick photos of works in progress. In other disciplines, it could be reflections after a lab or snippets or photos from fieldwork. The point here is to really value the sense making and give students permission to bring that messiness into their portfolios. So what you will see here on the screen, documentations of a portfolio of mine of tanglegrams, brainstorms, working together with students, other students in the studio, works in progress here as well, supported by simple dot points and things that are outlining these artifacts, as well as bits and pieces from Instagram that were constantly in my feed and in my face as I was learning all this theory and were really informing my opinions about what I was learning as well. So how am I going to do this? Scaffolding these design skills, moving between these in-between fragments to students developing these confident and meaningful ePortfolios. And I do get a lot of people say to me, you know, but you've trained in design, I'm not a designer, or I don't have the time to learn this. So I do want to clarify that when I say design, quote unquote, that's what I really mean to say is storytelling, helping students plan how a reader moves through and experiences their ePortfolio, how all this information is organized, and how it all supports the story that we're trying to communicate. So an example is, and one that I've experienced, is to start small. And for example, in the MTeach, we started with a short written report that could have easily been a Word document, something submitted as a PDF. But because it was done through PebblePad, we were encouraged to experiment by adding bits of images, sounds, short videos, even bits of memes and stuff from clips from movies that we enjoyed that were all a part of this thinking that we were going through and really complemented the text. And that gave us a really playful entry point to build confidence and familiarity with the platform as well. In a similar vein, another simple task like that could be presentations in class. We've run a couple. There was one that was 3 slides. You spoke for 5 minutes. Those slides are then saved as images and they become the foundation for 3 pages within a portfolio. They work as a nice header or a chunk of information that then text is built around and other elements, other multimedia elements are added. Even poster making in this sense to scaffold the idea of layout and visual communication can be really important in this space as well to help our students just start to experiment and play with a bit of risk. This can lead, and with the help of tools like Canva or even PowerPoint design features, I mean, why not lean into that? It's a great way to experiment with what our taste level is, what we like, what we don't, what works for the story that we're trying to communicate. So letting students sort of play and experiment in this assisted space helps them with flow and hierarchy and the kind of emphasis they need without leaning into specialist design skills. It can help them with font size and colors, allowing for like key messages and points to stand out in an otherwise just full-bodied chunk of text. It teaches them how to slow readers down by using things like pull quotes. And you'll see down here in the bottom right, this was a slide from a presentation that was done and then used as part of an ePortfolio as well. So that kind of leads nicely into a bit of UX design talk before we jump into kind of make this all into practice. So user experience UX design, which in this context simply means understanding or knowing how someone will move through your ePortfolio. So there is one line, and I don't know who told me this line or where I even got this from, but it has stuck with me. over the years and something that I do refer to. And it is, if a viewer or reader only had 30 seconds on your ePortfolio or on your page on anything, what are the key points you'd like to communicate? And in thinking about that question and breaking it down, it does force you to think about who your audience is. So who is the viewer? What is this story that you are actually trying to communicate? What are these key points? Is it an assessor, a future employer, a peer? How is this ePortfolio being shared? What is the information that we're trying to communicate? So for an example, if it was an assessor, we could be really explicit about that. We could use headings, colors, and clear navigation cues to show where you're addressing certain criteria. Even a simple, dear assessor, this section demonstrates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, makes an assessor's job easier without compromising any sort of authenticity. This is what wayfinding and signposting is. It's making that navigation really easy. Good user experience also means accessibility through multimodalities, whether that's combining text, image, and audio, just so readers have a different way to connect with the story that you're trying to tell. And I would also just like to touch on this idea of consistency. So consistency is a reader or a viewer's best friend, and it builds trust. For example, if pull quotes are always blue or captions are always in smaller italics, the reader quickly learns how to read your design language, your visual language, and can clearly understand when and where they're picking up certain types of information. So before we jump into an activity, I do want to mention this idea of wireframing, which is what we're going to practice. So this is a process of sketching or mapping a page before building it. It's sort of like story building for a film. It's how you plan how content flows and what the reader can see first. And that's exactly what we're going to practice next. So I'm going to ask you to wireframe a Pebble page about you as an introduction to the others in this mini bash. So we've talked about ePortfolios as living personal documents and the in-between spaces that feed them. We've talked about some of the simple ways to scaffold that design and UX thinking as well. So we'll try this quick wireframing exercise, and I don't want anyone to worry about making anything that is pretty, but instead focus on what are you going to tell us, how's it going to flow, and what is that overall message and story. So it can be professional, it can be a bit personal, it can be a mix of professional and personal. So there are some steps up here. The first, I'd like you to start by writing just a list of things about you. The longer this list, the better. Then you want to go through and you want to prioritize what you'd like the others on this webinar to know in a one-page PebblePad ePortfolio. So you're really thinking about who the audience is and what you're trying to communicate. We'll then wireframe this design or the layout of the page. Now you can use a pencil and a pen or a piece of paper, like I've done to the right here, or you can use any sort of digital tool, whether that be Word, PowerPoint, or a digital whiteboard, whatever makes you fully comfortable, or you might even jump into PebblePad straight away. You want to consider what images you might use. Perhaps it's your own, ones that you've taken, perhaps it's favorite artworks. Are there songs or sound recordings that add to the feel of the portfolio? Are there past presentations that could be images or even videos that communicate a part of who you are and what's really drawing the reader in? So once you've done that and you've started on one wireframe, some of you might do this quickly, some of you might take more time. I really do want you to push yourself to do another one. So with the same information, how can we rework the layout to tell a slightly different style of story, but with the same information? And that would just be a great comparison and a bit of a talking point for us. And we will take photos of these. You can use your phone. QR code's going to pop up soon for a Padlet. Upload them there. Write a bit of a message. Let me know what you're thinking about this experience, about wireframing, about any thoughts or questions, and we will regroup on the Padlet, and we'll have times for some questions and things as well.